Emma sat quietly in her father's old study on a cold winter evening. The room felt empty without him. 6 months had passed since Robert Thompson had died peacefully in his sleep. He had been a social worker in their small English town for over 30 years. Everyone knew him as a kind man who helped families in need. Emma was going through her father's belongings. There were boxes everywhere filled with old papers, books, and memories. She felt sad but also curious. Her father had lived such a full life, and she wanted to understand it better. She opened the drawers of his old wooden desk one by one. Most contained the usual things: pens, papers, and old letters. But in the bottom drawer, pushed far back behind some files, she found something she had never seen before. It was a leather wallet, brown and worn from many years of use. The wallet felt heavy in Emma's hands. The leather was smooth and soft, like it had been touched thousands of times. The corners were bent and faded. Emma could tell this wallet had been very important to someone. She wondered why her father had kept it hidden away. Emma opened the wallet carefully. Inside, she found what she expected: a few old business cards from people her father had worked with, some receipts that were too faded to read, and an old library card from years ago. But as she looked closer, her fingers touched something else. Beneath everything else was a photograph. It was old and yellowed with age. The corners were bent, and there were small cracks across the surface. But Emma could still see the picture clearly. The photograph showed a young woman standing in front of a small cottage. She had kind eyes and long brown hair. In her arms, she held a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blanket. Behind them, Emma could see roses climbing up the walls of the cottage. The flowers looked beautiful, even in the old photograph. The woman in the picture was smiling, but her smile looked tired. Emma could see that this woman had been through difficult times. There was something in her eyes that spoke of worry and struggle, but also hope. Emma turned the photograph over. On the back, in her father's neat handwriting, were the words, "Mary and Little James, 1989. Emma stared at these words for a long time. 1989 was the year before she was born. She remembered her mother telling her that they had tried for many years to have a baby before Emma came along. Emma felt confused and curious. Who were Mary and James? She had never heard these names before. Her father had never mentioned them during family dinners or quiet conversations. Why had he kept this photograph for so many years? And why had he never told his family about these people? Emma studied the photograph again. The baby looked so small and peaceful in his mother's arms. The woman, Mary, looked very young. Emma guessed she was probably only about 20 years old. The cottage behind them looked cozy but very simple. Emma could see that this family did not have much money. Emma felt a deep sadness growing in her chest. Even after her father had died, he was still surprising her. She had always thought she knew everything about him. He had been such a loving father, patient and kind. He had taught her to ride a bicycle, helped her with homework, and listened to all her problems when she was growing up. But this photograph told Emma that there were parts of her father's life she knew nothing about. There were stories he had never shared, acts of kindness he had never talked about. Emma realized that her father had kept secrets, not because he wanted to hide things, but because he was modest about the good things he did for others. Emma held the wallet close to her heart and thought about her father. She remembered how he would come home from work looking tired but never complaining. He would always ask about her day and help her mother with dinner. He never talked much about his work, except to say that he tried to help families who were having difficult times. Now Emma wondered if Mary and little James had been one of those families. Had her father helped them in some way? Had he cared about them so much that he kept their photograph for over 30 years? The room grew darker as the sun set outside. Emma could hear the wind blowing through the trees in the garden. She felt lonely sitting in her father's chair, surrounded by his memories. But she also felt determined. She wanted to know more about Mary and James. She wanted to understand this part of her father's life that had been hidden from her. Emma carefully placed the photograph back in the wallet. She decided that tomorrow she would start looking for answers. She would try to find Mary and James, if they were still alive. She would learn their story and understand why her father had cared about them so much. Tonight, though, she would just sit in the quiet study and remember her father. She would think about all the love he had given her and wonder about all the love he had given to others. Emma was beginning to understand that her father had been even more special than she had ever known. Emma could not stop thinking about the photograph. Every morning when she woke up, she thought about Mary and little James. Every night before she went to sleep, she wondered what had happened to them. The mystery was growing bigger in her mind, and she knew she had to find answers. She decided to spend her weekends looking through all of her father's papers. Emma went back to his study and opened every box she could find. There were so many things she had never seen before. Her father had kept everything: old letters, work files, and photographs of people she did not recognize. In one box, Emma found dozens of thank you letters. They were from families her father had helped over the years. The letters were written in different handwriting styles, some neat and careful, others messy and rushed. But they all said the same thing: thank you for your kindness, thank you for believing in us, thank you for not giving up on our family. Emma read letter after letter. There were notes from children thanking her father for helping them stay in school. There were messages from mothers grateful that he had found them safe places to live. There were cards from fathers who said Robert had helped them find jobs when no one else would hire them. Each letter made Emma more proud of her father, but also more sad that he had never shared these stories with her. She was learning that her father had touched many lives, but he had been too modest to talk about his good deeds at home. Emma found more photographs too. Pictures of families at Christmas parties, children at school events, and people celebrating birthdays. Her father was in many of these photos, always smiling in the background, never wanting to be the center of attention. But Emma still could not find any more information about Mary and James. She looked through every box twice, but there were no other clues about the woman and baby in the photograph. Emma decided she needed help. She remembered that her father used to spend a lot of time at the local library. He would go there to read newspapers and research information for the families he was helping. Maybe someone there would remember Mary and James. The library was a small, cozy building in the center of town. Emma had been there many times as a child with her father. Mrs. Davies, the elderly librarian, had worked there for as long as Emma could remember. She was a kind woman with white hair and gentle eyes who knew everyone in town. When Emma walked into the library, Mrs. Davies looked up from her desk and smiled warmly. She had known Emma since she was a little girl, and she had been very sad to hear about Robert's death. Emma approached the desk nervously. She was not sure if Mrs. Davies would remember anything about a photograph from so many years ago. But she had to try. Emma pulled out the old photograph and placed it carefully on the desk. Mrs. Davies put on her reading glasses and looked at it closely. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her face lit up with recognition. Mrs. Davies smiled and nodded her head slowly. She remembered Mary Wilson very well. She told Emma that Mary had been a very young woman, probably only 19 or 20 years old. She had come to their town in 1989, and she was pregnant and completely alone. Mrs. Davies explained that Mary had no family to help her and no money to rent a proper home. She had been sleeping wherever she could find shelter. One cold winter night, Robert had found her sleeping in the old bus shelter near the town center. Emma listened carefully to every word. She could picture her father walking home from work on a cold evening and seeing this young, pregnant woman with nowhere to go. She knew exactly what he would have done. Mrs. Davies continued the story. Instead of just telling Mary to move along like some people might have done, Robert had helped her find a safe place to live. The cottage in the photograph belonged to an elderly woman who had moved away to live with her daughter. Robert had arranged for Mary to stay there without paying rent. Emma felt tears starting to form in her eyes. This sounded exactly like something her father would do. He never could stand to see people suffering when he had the power to help them. But Mrs. Davies had more to tell. She explained that little James had been born with a very serious heart problem. The doctors had told Mary that her baby needed expensive surgery very soon, or he would not live to see his first birthday. Mary had no insurance and no money to pay for the operation. Emma asked what had happened next. Mrs. Davies smiled and told her about her father's amazing kindness. Robert had organized the entire town to help save baby James. He had set up fundraising events at the church and the school. He had contacted charities and written letters asking for help. He had even used his own savings to help pay for the surgery. The whole town had come together to help Mary and James. People who had very little money themselves had donated what they could. The local shops had held special sales and given the profits to help the baby. Everyone had worked together because Robert had shown them how important it was to care for others. Little James had gotten his surgery, and it had saved his life. Emma sat back in her chair, feeling overwhelmed by pride and sadness. Her father had never told her any of this story. He had simply done what he thought was right, without needing anyone to praise him or thank him. Emma asked Mrs. Davies if she knew where Mary and James were now. Mrs. Davies smiled and told her that James had grown up to become a nurse at the local hospital. Mary still lived in the same cottage, though it looked very different now with all the improvements she had made over the years. Emma's heart began to beat faster. After all these years, she might finally be able to meet the people in her father's treasured photograph. Emma woke up early on Saturday morning with butterflies in her stomach. Today was the day she would finally meet Mary and James. She had called ahead and spoken to James on the phone. His voice had been warm and kind, just like she imagined it would be. He had told her that his mother would be very happy to see her. Emma got dressed carefully and ate a small breakfast, though she was too nervous to eat much. She kept thinking about what she would say to Mary and James. How do you thank someone for being part of your father's secret life of kindness? The drive to the cottage took about 20 minutes through the countryside. Emma drove slowly, trying to calm her nerves. She passed green fields with sheep grazing peacefully, old stone walls covered with ivy, and small farmhouses with smoke coming from their chimneys. As Emma turned down the narrow country lane, her hands began to shake slightly on the steering wheel. She could see the cottage ahead of her, sitting quietly among tall trees. Her heart beat faster as she got closer. The cottage looked almost exactly like it had in the old photograph. It was small and made of old stone, with a red tile roof and small windows. But now, 30 years later, it looked much more beautiful. The roses that had been small in the photograph now covered the entire front wall of the house. They bloomed in cascades of pink and white flowers that filled the air with sweet perfume. Emma could see that Mary had taken very good care of the cottage over the years. The garden was full of colorful flowers, and the path to the front door was lined with lavender plants. It looked like a home where someone had been very happy for a long time. Emma parked her car and sat for a moment, taking deep breaths. She looked at herself in the mirror and tried to smooth her hair. She wanted to make a good impression on the people who had been so important to her father. When Emma knocked on the door, it opened almost immediately. Standing there was a woman with silver gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Even though she was now in her 50s, Emma recognized her immediately. This was Mary from the photograph, but older and more confident than the young, worried girl she had been 30 years ago. Mary's smile was exactly the same as in the photograph, gentle and warm. She looked at Emma for a moment, and then her smile grew even bigger. Mary opened the door wide and welcomed Emma inside. She explained that James had called her the night before to tell her that Emma was coming. Mary had been looking forward to this meeting for days. The inside of the cottage was small but very cozy. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and Emma could smell fresh flowers and baking bread. The walls were painted in soft yellow and cream colors that made everything feel warm and peaceful. But what caught Emma's attention most were the photographs. They were everywhere, on the walls, on small tables, and on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. Most of them showed James at different stages of his life. There were pictures of him as a little boy playing in the garden, as a teenager in his school uniform, and as a young man in his nursing school graduation cap and gown. And there, in the most special place on the mantelpiece, was a photograph of her father. It showed Robert Thomson smiling broadly, standing next to a young James in his nursing uniform. Emma had never seen this photograph before, but she could tell it had been taken recently, maybe just a few years ago. Mary sat down in a comfortable armchair and invited Emma to sit on the sofa across from her. Emma noticed that Mary moved slowly and carefully, like someone who had worked very hard all her life but was still strong and healthy. Mary began to tell Emma her story. She spoke quietly and thoughtfully, as if she had thought about these memories many times over the years. She told Emma that her father had not just helped them once and then forgotten about them. He had stayed in their lives for 30 years. After James had recovered from his surgery, Robert had continued to visit them regularly. He had brought toys for James when he was little, and books when he got older. When James started school, Robert had helped Mary buy his uniforms and supplies. When James wanted to play sports, Robert had helped pay for his equipment. Mary explained that Robert had attended every important event in James's life. When James graduated from high school, Robert had been there cheering in the audience. When Mary could not afford to take time off work to attend James's nursing school graduation, Robert had gone in her place and taken photographs to show her later. Mary told Emma that Robert had never wanted any credit for what he did. Whenever Mary tried to thank him, he would just say that he was doing what any decent person would do. But Mary knew that not everyone would have cared the way Robert did. Most people would have helped once and then moved on with their own lives. As Mary was speaking, Emma heard a car door slam outside. A moment later, the front door opened and a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes walked into the room. Emma knew immediately that this was James, even though he was now a grown man instead of the tiny baby from the photograph. James looked at Emma with the same warm smile his mother had. When Mary introduced them, James crossed the room and took Emma's hands in both of his. His voice was full of emotion when he told Emma that her father had been like a guardian angel to their family. James explained that he had become a nurse because of Robert's influence. Robert had shown him that the most important thing anyone could do was to help others when they were in trouble. Emma felt tears of joy and pride streaming down her face as she realized that her father's legacy was sitting right here in this room. Over the next few weeks, James became Emma's guide to understanding her father's hidden life. He told her that there were many other people in town who had been helped by Robert over the years. James offered to introduce Emma to some of them, and Emma eagerly agreed. She wanted to learn everything she could about this secret side of her father. The first person James took Emma to meet was William Harris. He was now a teacher at the local primary school, but James explained that William had not always been so successful. When Robert first met him, William had been a troubled teenager who was always getting into fights and skipping school. William lived in a neat house near the school where he worked. When Emma and James arrived, William welcomed them warmly. He was a man in his 40s with gentle eyes and a kind smile. It was hard for Emma to imagine that he had ever been a difficult young person. William invited them to sit in his living room, which was filled with books and children's artwork from his students. He told Emma that he owed everything good in his life to her father. William explained that when he was 16, he had been angry at the world. His own father had left when he was young, and his mother worked 2 jobs just to pay the rent. William felt like nobody cared about him, so he had stopped caring about anything else. Most adults had given up on William. His teachers thought he was hopeless, and the police knew him by name because he was always causing trouble. But Robert had seen something different in the angry teenager. William told Emma that Robert had never lectured him or tried to force him to change. Instead, Robert had simply spent time with him. He had taken William fishing on weekends and had taught him how to fix old bicycles. Slowly, William had begun to trust Robert and to believe that someone actually cared about what happened to him. Robert had helped William finish school and had even helped him apply for college. When William decided he wanted to become a teacher, Robert had supported his dream. Now William worked with children who reminded him of his younger self, kids who felt angry and forgotten. The next person Emma met was Lucy Martinez, a woman in her 50s who worked as a supervisor at the local clothing factory. Lucy lived in a comfortable house with a beautiful garden, but she told Emma that her life had not always been so good. Lucy explained that 20 years ago, she had been a single mother with 3 young children. Her husband had left her, and she had no family nearby to help her. Lucy had been working as a cleaner in the evenings, but the money was not enough to buy food and pay rent. Lucy remembered the day she had met Robert. She had been standing in line at the food bank, feeling ashamed that she could not provide for her children. Robert had been volunteering there that day, helping to sort donations and hand out food packages. Robert had noticed that Lucy looked embarrassed and worried. Instead of just giving her the food and sending her away, he had asked if there was anything else he could do to help. Lucy had been too proud to ask for more help, but Robert had sensed that she needed it. Without telling Lucy, Robert had arranged for groceries to be delivered to her house every week. The delivery person had told her that the food was from an anonymous donor who wanted to help her family. Lucy had never known it was Robert until years later. Robert had also helped Lucy find a better job at the factory. He had spoken to the manager and had convinced him to give Lucy a chance. Over the years, Lucy had worked hard and had been promoted several times. Now she was able to provide well for her family, and all 3 of her children had gone to college. Emma also met Thomas Wright, an elderly man who lived in a small apartment near the town center. Thomas was now in his 80s, but his mind was still sharp and his eyes still sparkled when he talked about Robert. Thomas told Emma that he had lost his home after a long illness had made him unable to work. The medical bills had used up all his savings, and he had nowhere to go. Thomas had been sleeping in his car when Robert found him. Robert had helped Thomas find a small apartment that he could afford with his pension. But more importantly, Robert had visited Thomas every week for over 10 years, just to make sure he was not lonely. They would drink tea together and talk about the news or the weather or Thomas's memories of the war. Thomas explained that many elderly people in their town felt forgotten and invisible. But Robert had made Thomas feel like his life still mattered, like he was still important to someone. One afternoon, as Emma and James sat in Mary's beautiful garden, James pulled out his wallet. He showed Emma a photograph from his nursing school graduation day. In the picture, Robert was standing beside James, smiling with pride and joy. Robert looked like a father watching his own son achieve something wonderful. James told Emma that Robert had come to his wedding too. Mary had been nervous about walking James down the aisle by herself, since she had never been married and did not know the traditions. But Robert had offered to walk James down the aisle instead. He had said it would be an honor to do it. Emma began to understand that her father had not lived just one life, but many. He had been like a father to James, a mentor to William, a friend to Thomas, and a helper to Lucy. He had been a source of hope for people when they felt hopeless, and a quiet force for good in their community. Emma told James and Mary that her father had never talked about any of this work at home. Mary smiled gently and explained that this was Robert's way. He had not helped people because he wanted to feel good about himself or because he wanted others to praise him. He had helped because he could not stand to see people suffering when he had the power to make their lives better. Emma finally understood why her father had kept that old photograph in his wallet for so many years. It was not just a memory of something that had happened long ago. It was a reminder of all the good that was possible in the world when people chose to care for each other. 6 months had passed since Emma had first found the photograph in her father's wallet. During that time, her life had completely changed. She had discovered a whole community of people who had been touched by her father's kindness, and she had learned that Robert Thompson's legacy was much bigger than she had ever imagined. Emma had been thinking a lot about what she wanted to do with everything she had learned. She felt like she had been given a great gift, the knowledge of how much good one person could do in the world. But she also felt a responsibility to carry on her father's work in some way. After many conversations with Mary, James, William, Lucy, Thomas, and the other people her father had helped, Emma decided to create something special. She wanted to start a foundation that would continue her father's work of helping families in need. Emma spent weeks planning and preparing. She met with lawyers to set up the legal paperwork, and she talked to local business owners about supporting the new foundation. She was nervous about speaking in public, but she knew this was something she had to do. Finally, Emma was ready to announce her plans to the community. She reserved the town hall for a Saturday evening and sent invitations to everyone she had met through her father's work. She also invited other people in the town who she thought might want to help. On the evening of the meeting, Emma arrived at the town hall early. She was wearing her best dress and carrying her father's old wallet in her purse for good luck. Her hands were shaking a little as she arranged her notes on the podium. As people began to arrive, Emma was amazed to see how many came. Mary and James sat in the front row, along with William, Lucy, and Thomas. But there were also dozens of other people filling the chairs, some that Emma recognized from her father's photographs, and others who were strangers to her. As Emma looked out at the crowd, she realized that every person in the room had been touched by her father's kindness in some way. Some had been helped directly, while others had simply known Robert as a good man who cared about his community. When it was time to begin, Emma walked slowly to the front of the room. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady and clear when she began to speak. Emma told the crowd that over the past 6 months, she had learned things about her father that had completely changed how she saw him. She had discovered that Robert Thompson had lived a secret life of kindness, helping people quietly and without ever asking for thanks or recognition. Emma explained that she had met people who had been saved by her father's generosity when they had nowhere else to turn. She had learned about families who had been fed when they were hungry, children who had been able to stay in school because of his help, and elderly people who had been kept from loneliness by his regular visits. Emma told the crowd that her father had taught her something very important through his example. The most important things we do in life are often the things that nobody else sees. The small acts of kindness that we do without expecting praise or reward are the ones that can change someone's whole life. Emma then announced her plan to create the Thompson Foundation. This would be a charity that would continue her father's work of helping families in crisis. The foundation would help people quietly and with dignity, just as Robert had always done. Emma explained that the foundation would not just give money to people and then forget about them. Instead, it would try to give people hope and show them that they were not alone in their struggles. The foundation would help people in the same personal way that her father had always helped, by seeing each person as an individual who deserved care and respect. Emma told the crowd that she wanted to focus on helping single mothers, troubled teenagers, elderly people who were lonely, and families who were having hard times through no fault of their own. These were the same kinds of people her father had always cared about most. When Emma finished speaking, the whole room erupted in applause. Many people had tears in their eyes, and Emma could see that they were excited about the idea of continuing Robert's work. After the formal meeting was over, people came up to talk to Emma personally. James approached her with tears streaming down his face. He told Emma that her father would be incredibly proud of what she was doing. James said that Emma was carrying on her father's most important work. Emma reached into her purse and pulled out her father's old leather wallet. She opened it carefully and showed James what was inside. Along with the original photograph of Mary and baby James from 1989, Emma had added a new photograph. The new picture showed Emma, Mary, and James standing together in Mary's beautiful rose garden. The three of them were smiling and holding hands, representing 3 generations connected by love and kindness. Emma told James that she finally understood why her father had kept that original photograph in his wallet for so many years. It was not just a memory of something good he had done in the past. Instead, it was a reminder of what was possible when people chose to care for each other and help those in need. As Emma drove home that evening, she thought about all the people her father had helped during his lifetime, and all the people the foundation would help in the years to come. She realized that her father's legacy was not written on any monument or recorded in any history book. Instead, it was written in the lives he had changed, the hope he had planted in people's hearts, and the love that would continue to grow and spread long after he was gone. Emma smiled as she touched the wallet in her purse. Her father had shown her that a single person could make an enormous difference in the world. Now it was her turn to plant gardens of hope in other people's lives, just as he had done.